This is William K. Murtaugh, Witness 1, and today we're going to talk about interlopers and trolls. Actually, interlopers and trolls are the same thing. Now, in one instance, the interlopers are people that interfere with court proceedings and court cases, specifically getting involved with the CPS cases. One of the topics we have been discussing as of late, the murder of Christopher James Hallett, was the result of interloping, result of people interfering where they don't belong, interfering with a child custody case in this instance. Now, it is rumored that somehow Neely Blanchard got in her head that rather than Chris Hallett helping her regain custody of our children, he was doing quite the opposite. He was actually engaging in efforts to keep her from getting custody of her children. And as this idea festered, it is alleged that she finally snapped and murdered Christopher James Hallett. Now, I don't know if I got the middle name right or not. I'll just stick with Christopher Hallett at this point. Apparently there's another Christopher Hallett up in Ohio, and I don't want to get them mixed up, because his middle name may be E for Elliot. I have to check that. As a precaution, I'm going to start this all over again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is William K. Murtaugh, Witness 1, and today we're going to talk about interlopers and trolls. Now, on the first subject at hand here, interlopers, this has to do with people interfering in legal disputes where they are not qualified to do so and certainly do not belong in that case. And at the center of this is E-Clause and Christopher Hallett. Now, in that particular case, Neely Blanchard was probably the closest friend and most intense supporter that Christopher Hallett had. She actually ran, to some extent, a Facebook site for E-Clause. She promoted it, wore clothing with E-Clause trademark on it, drove a car with E-Clause license plates, and so on. She was a groupie, in the loosest term, or associate, or supporter, whatever. So it came as a huge surprise when we all learned that Neely Blanchard murdered Chris Hallett. Everybody was shocked. If anybody was going to murder Chris Hallett, it certainly should not have been Neely Blanchard. But here we are. Now, why did Neely Blanchard murder Chris Hallett? Well, the prevailing theory, as put forward by law enforcement, is that Neely came to the conclusion, or was convinced, that rather than helping her regain custody of her children, he was in fact working to prevent her from gaining custody of her children, that he was actively involved in efforts to prevent her from regaining permanent custody of her children. Now, why would that be? Why would Christopher Hallett suddenly do that. Now, as far as I've been able to ascertain at this moment, there is no evidence that Chris Hallett was actively trying to prevent her from getting her children back. Now, the fact of the matter is, he wasn't able to get her children back, and because of his actions, he was actually making it more difficult for her to get her children back. He was filing useless paperwork with the courts, which were going to do nothing to help her. And in some cases, it was going to make matters worse because it was such an inept and incompetent filing that the courts looked at it as some kind of joke. That Neely was somehow impeding the proceedings of the court by allowing this nonsense to be done in her behalf, and it made her situation worse. So this is the interloping, getting involved where you're not qualified to help. E-Claus, Chris Hallett, and other people should have stayed away from this case. This is probably one of the rare times where CPS was justified in their actions. That Neely Blanchard should not have custody of her children. You know, she did interfere with the custody of the children by kidnapping them and taking them across the state of Kentucky. And she was indicted for it a week before the murder. Now, this may have been what triggered her actions. This may have been what triggered the murder. Now, did someone advise Neely to kidnap her children? Take the kids and run. That's the prevailing theory at the moment. It's pure speculation. But that seems to be the direction we're going here. Is that she was given horrifically bad advice by incompetent, unqualified people that interfered with her case, these interlopers. And she is now sitting in a county jail, charged with murder in the first degree, with some special circumstances attached. And she's likely going to face life in prison, or at least a substantial prison term. So, this is what happens when people that should have minded their own business gets involved in situations they don't belong. And this brings us to the trolls. And there's an individual that goes by the username Task Force. They have a YouTube channel, Task Force. For some weird reason, this troll is obsessed with my YouTube channel. And like clockwork, within the first part of my live stream, Task Force comes into the room, comes into the chat. Now, Task Force doesn't engage in any useful conversation. They don't debate. They don't talk about the murder. Don't talk about anything other than pictures of people in their underwear. Task Force, for some unknown reason, is obsessed with underwear. Men's underwear in particular. And Task Force is also obsessed with personally attacking those people who are in the chat, calling them liars, calling them all sorts of names, kindergarten stuff. This apparently is all this task force person is capable of doing, is personal attacks, personal insults. Now, everybody on the internet who operates a chat, a room, an online group, or anything in public are subject to trolls. It's part of doing business, they say, even though this channel isn't a business, at least not yet. So trolls are expected. But Task Force is a rather unique troll. See, Task Force declares that they are affiliated in some way, shape, or form with the United States government, specifically to President Trump. They are supposed to be a messenger and an advocate for preventing pedophilia, child trafficking, satanic ritual abuse, kidnapping of children, and so on and so forth. But they don't do that. They do just quite the opposite. Now, last night in particular, Task Force made a declaration that I found rather interesting. See, one of my regulars in the chat is Alexander Goddard. Now, Alexander Goddard is known for her efforts during the Steubenville, Ohio rape case. She, in fact, is credited with single-handedly bringing the case forward and getting it prosecuted where it otherwise may not have been. 2 football players on the high school team were accused of rape of a minor. Now, this could be defined as pedophilia or molestation, because the victim, the Jane Doe, was underage. She was a child in the eyes of the law. So this makes the 2 defendants in the case pedophiles. Now, they were tried and convicted and actually confessed to what they did. They apologized in court. Yet, Task Force defended these 2 pedophiles. Now, here is Task Force, who is supposed to be fighting pedophilia. Task Force is supposed to be an advocate for the victims of pedophilia. And yet, she becomes a rape apologist, or he. It's assumed that Task Force is a female, but it could very well be a male. We don't know at this point, because Task Force will not use their real name. They hide behind the username. That's typical of these kind of trolls. Anyway, so we have this troll being a rape apologist coming to the defense of a pedophile, a convicted pedophile, not just one convicted pedophile, but 2 convicted pedophiles. Now, this is not the first time Task Force has done this. There was a case of an unregistered pedophile down here in the state of Florida who actually pled guilty to 4 counts of lewd acts in the presence of children. Pedophilia. she defended that individual, or it defended that individual. Another instance of where task force actually came to the aid and comfort of a convicted pedophile. Why this sudden defense of pedophiles? Rather strange for someone that is supposed to be against pedophilia, against child rapists, against this sort of thing, and yet here this individual comes to the defense of someone who pled guilty to these crimes. Rather strange. And then on top of all this, task force proves that they're a bigot, that they're a racist, that task force actually made a remark on the chat criticizing someone for being in interracial relationships. Now, this is taking a trip back in time to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, where interracial relationships were illegal. That sort of thing would get people hanged from a tree. And task force apparently doesn't support interracial relationships. That a white woman shouldn't be dating black men. Kind of mixed messages here. But it does demonstrate that task force is a racist and a bigot. And they are the opposite of what they proclaim to be. They are not for fighting pedophilia, child rape, and abuse. They apparently are advocates for these practices, that they will defend people who have been convicted of these crimes, while at the same time going around and accusing innocent people of these crimes with absolutely no proof, with fabricated evidence, hearsay, things that would not be admissible in court. Kind of a sad commentary. Now, one final point regarding task force as I close out today's Mobilethon. Task force is supposed to be part of the United States government in some form. Yet YouTube and Twitter keep closing their accounts because of abuses. Now, the primary example of why this is so strange is President Trump. Now, President Trump has a habit of getting in trouble with Twitter. And he engages in things that people allege would get the rest of us thrown off Twitter. But since Donald J. Trump is the President of the United States and is also a high-ranking government official, he gets away with it. They put disclaimers. Twitter puts disclaimers on his posts that they feel are inappropriate and so on and so forth. But he's not banned, he's not restricted, he's allowed to continue. And this is true of other high-ranking government officials and government agencies. Now, the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force is supposed to be affiliated almost directly with President Trump. They declare that they are acting under a mandate put out by President Trump. Their spokesperson, Timothy Charles Holmseth, claims to be third in line to the President of the United States, that there's one man between him and the President of the United States, and he is the only one authorized to speak on behalf of either the President of the United States or the task force. And yet, Twitter keeps knocking this agency off their account. This is just another element of proof that the task force is not what it claims to be. Government agencies, as a rule, don't engage in personal attacks of social media accounts, especially one that only has 1,000 subscribers and at any one time, at most, has 40 people online at the same time in the chat. Last night, I had 30, because even though it showed 31, the 31st one was this particular troll, and there were at least 2 others in the room that were trolling it. So that's just another reason to question these people that go on the internet, claim that they're auditors, that they're agents for the United States government, that they have close relationships with the President of the United States, and so on and so forth, when it is simply not true. January 20th, Donald J. Trump is no longer going to be President of the United States. He's going to be former President. So I'll be rather curious to see what happens to the Pentagon Pedophile Task Force and the High Command at noon on January 20th, because they will no longer have the backing of the current President of the United States. They may have the backing of an ex-President of the United States, a one-term President of the United States. So that is going to diminish their influence and power, because the next President of the United States is someone that they have accused of being involved in certain crimes. And so now they are not going to have that connection to the White House or to the Pentagon, for that matter. Things are going to change, and it's going to be interesting to see what changes the task force and the high command make to fit into this new set of circumstances. It's going to be hard to do, I think. But then again, these charlatans, these interlopers, these trolls, they seem to come up with this stuff out of their heads because people are going to believe what they want to believe. You can't argue as stupid as they say. In closing, along with asking people to like and subscribe, I would like to thank those that got me over the 1,000 mark. The last time I checked YouTube, I was at 1,002. And hopefully, as people like and subscribe in the future, that number will build up to where we can stay above 1,000. And not fall below 1,000 again, like what happened in the past. This is not the first time I've been to 1,000, but we got up there and then we fell right back down again. We need to stay consistently at 1,000 so that I can go ahead with the plans that I have for this channel in the days, weeks, and months to come. It takes, from what I understand, a week or two for YouTube to finally certify my channel and allow me to do the things that people with over 1,000 subscribers can do. And the main goal is to be able to live stream while mobile. This opens up a whole new realm of possibility as we start covering events in the next year that would be enhanced by being there live streaming live. And so that's what I'm looking forward to. So please like, subscribe, share my content, and stay tuned as we go forward. Have a good weekend, and have a good one.